Okay, we are here for part 6 of the interview with Judy Wagoner, and we're going to start off today talking about what her and Dar Wagoner's wedding was like.
Okay, Darla and I were married on March 18th, 1961, during spring break from college. We were both in college down at Southern Illinois University, and that's why we chose March. That day, it rained, it snowed, it blew, it did everything under the sun. But anyway, we had a lovely wedding at Fairview Church, my little tiny home church on the hill there, about a mile and a half from where I grew up, and had a nice crowd of people. A lot of his friends and relatives came, and of course a lot of the church people and friends of ours came, and relatives. And Marvin, Darwin's brother, was best man, and my maid of honor was Linda Irwin, my best friend through grade school and high school, and still is. And I had two bridesmaids, and that was my sister Linda and my sister Gloria. My color was pink, and all of the accessories were pink. And let's see, the other people, the other men that served was Darwin's brother-in-law, Jack. Who's the other one?
Other brother-in-laws?
Either that or one of his nephews. I'm not sure. It could have been Daryl. I don't know. One of his nephews. I don't know who it was. I should have looked before. I know that the other two. And then it was a regular wedding. Mother had made my wedding gown, which was white, long-sleeved satin, and it was really pretty. I've still got it, my cedar chest today. And she made the little thing that held the veil, and it was a cute little headpiece. And the pastor was I don't even remember his name.
Was he the Fairview pastor at the time?
Yeah, he was the pastor there, and he had been there for a while, but not forever and ever. You know, we didn't know them real well. And he had a real strong country southern accent. But anyway, it was a nice wedding, and our church was situated to where you walked up some stairs and went down the aisle, and Daddy walked me down the aisle and shook and sweat. He was a nervous wreck, and gave me away. And then the piano, we didn't have an organ. The piano was a good friend of Mother's.
Piano player?
Yeah, and I can't think of her name right now. I didn't know her well. Mother did. So, and then that's wrong. That's wrong. The piano player was my Aunt Harriet Thorne, Uncle Harold's wife. She was a good piano player and organist. And she played the piano and did a beautiful job. And the singer was Mother's good friend. Mother had worked with her at the hospital, but they had gone to school together, and Mother had known her for years. I think she lived in Lawrenceville. Mother used to live in Lawrenceville when she was young, and they were good friends in school, I think. And then I'm trying to think who else. Jeannie Pye was positioned at the sign-in. Jeannie was my girlfriend from the time I was a baby up until I graduated from high school, and she still is a friend. She worked at the guest register, and And then later I sang at her wedding. The room was fairly full.
It was out Fairview, right?
It was at Fairview
Yeah.
Church, where I went as a child, and where my mother went as a child, and her parents, and who knows who else went there.
Did you have bridesmaids?
Well, Linda and Gloria,
Okay.
and then my maid of honor. And I carried a little, I wanted a white Bible, but we didn't have one, and so I told we weren't happy with the flowers at all. Darwin was very upset with the flower that I got from him. But anyway, they wrapped a little Bible in white satin, so I guess that was good enough. And then afterwards, we stood on the stairs, going down a little ways from the sanctuary to the front door of the church. And people came by and wished us luck and everything, and all I could do was stand there and bawl the whole time about. And so then, anyway, we went on downstairs. At the bottom of that first flight of stairs, there was another flight of stairs going downstairs to the basement, and that's where we had my reception. And it was fixed up pretty, and several of the ladies at the church served and everything, and that was just real nice.
Did you have a flower girl or ring bearer?
Oh, yes. My flower girl was Marva Wagoner. She was so cute.
How old was she?
No, she was little. I don't know.
Toddler?
No,
or
she was
preschool?
probably 5, maybe.
Okay.
And then the ring bearer was Kelvin, her brother, Marvin's.
So he
Marvin's
would have
brother,
been
like kids.
3,
No, Kelvin was
or was he older than
he
her?
was a year or so older than
Okay,
Marva,
maybe 7.
something like that. And he carried the ring. I forgot about that. And it was a nice ceremony. And I have the book. The pastor gave me a little white book, which showed what the ceremony was like, and he had written in all the specifics, of it. But I've still got that little book. It's real nice, I thought, of him to do that. And then the reception was real nice. Everybody was down there, and they were all seated in chairs all around, and the table was set up with my cake. I had about 3 layers, tiered layers of a wedding cake, with a bride and groom on top of it, which I've still got that today in my china cabinet. And we had punch, and I don't know if I don't think we didn't have a dinner. I don't, there may have been some candy and things like that, for us. I don't remember for sure. It's been too many years ago. But anyway, so they took pictures. There's we got some pictures of Darwin and I cutting the cake, and and all of that. And then behind where the table sat for the cake and everything, there was a partition always with a serving opening in it where we would have church dinners, and behind that was the church kitchen. And so anyway, and I'm not sure. I don't think we had a dinner, but we may have had something else. I don't know if we had sandwiches or not. I just don't know. I don't remember. But and then people came out and got cake and everything and punch. There's probably coffee. They always had coffee in that church. Whenever I walk into that church basement today, I can still, I think, smell like coffee. It always smelled so good. Doris, you would have loved it. I don't know how they made that coffee, but it was always so good. So, and then after that, we opened our gifts. I suppose they had a few little things that they said and stuff that people talked. I don't know. I don't remember. And we opened our gifts and opened every one of them. And I read off, Darwin was opening while I read off who it was from and all of that stuff. And kept all the cards, had those for years, probably still do somewhere. And it was just real nice. I didn't know very many of Darwin's relatives, and I didn't know very many of the people where he grew up in Chansey, Illinois, which was about 20 miles from where I lived. And we met in high school. And, I didn't know any of the adults from that area. And of course, they were the ones that came, really. I mean, a few friends, I suppose. And then, after that, you know, it was late, and, Darwin and I left and went to my mother and dad's house, which was just a little ways, not too far away, and changed clothes. We got some clothes. And then, and I know, we were talking about how I cried, and finally he looked at me and he says, "Well, you are happy, are you?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "I don't know why I cried, but I couldn't help it." And then we left. Well, no, we went over to Petrolia, which is a little dumpy town near where my home was, maybe a couple, 3 miles from where I lived. Not toward the church, it's another direction. And one of Daddy's friends that he had always known and worked with was an amateur photographer, and so he took our pictures. But anyway, and so after that was, and then we went home and changed, and then we left and we drove over to Vincennes, Indiana, and didn't know what to do with ourselves. So we just got a motel and stayed there for the night. It was nice, you know, and we had, and they'd sent a bunch of cake with us and punch. So we had punch and cake again. And then the next morning we got up and got in the car, and we thought, well, we'll travel around somewhere. So we went down into Kentucky, which is not far away, and I don't know where else we went. And then we went over into southern Illinois, and I decided we don't know where else to go, so let's just go home. And we had our apartment. We had rented an apartment in an upstairs in an old house from a couple of old ladies about 3 blocks from campus at Carbondale. And by that time we had moved. Darwin's uncle and aunt had given us some old furniture, and we had moved all of that in and had bought groceries and had moved stuff in there. We hadn't lived there, but we had furnished it, you know, so that we were ready to live there. And so we moved in, and it was an upstairs apartment, and it had an outdoor entrance, and you had to go up a long flight of steps, and then there was a lovely, great big screened-in porch right there, and it was just huge. And then we went into the apartment. We had a bedroom and a living room and a kitchen and a bathroom, you know, and some closets. It was, you know, that size of a place. It was old, but it was nice. And then we started living there, and so our honeymoon consisted of going to Vincennes and driving through Kentucky and southern Illinois. And then through the years living at Carbondale, we, I did tell you about finally moving into a mobile home.
Yeah,
An old one. I told
you
you
covered all
that.
of Carbondale, yeah.
Okay, well,
And
I don't think I told you this much. When we lived down there, we always went to church. We never ever not go to church. We always did. We used to go to the great big Methodist church downtown in Carbondale. It was a beautiful church, and I was so impressed with the music and the choir. And the congregation was so big, and we went there for, you know, a year or so, I suppose. Well, Darwin was living. We did that before we got married. I was living on University Avenue, and he was living on, and I don't remember the name of the street, but it was 2 or 3 streets away from mine in that same general area. He lived with an older lady, and she had, I think, 4 or 5 students, boys, and he rented a part of a room from her. Had some interesting situations with some of his roommates. One of them wanted to eat everybody's food, and they all got tired of that, and he'd always go in and chug everybody's milk. He was a New Yorker, and anyway, and that's why they didn't like him, because he was such a snot. But anyway, one time he had drunk a bunch of their milk, and that made him mad, and so you know what they did. One of them took the milk carton, there was still milk in it, and they knew he'd drink the rest of it, given the time. So he peed in it. And they were just hilarious when the guy drank it. Isn't that awful? That's the way it was back then. They were, anyway, they got back at him, whether he knew it or not. I think he must have. And so anyway, we used to go, as I said, to the big First Methodist Church there in town. It's still there. In fact, Verlin Fritchley, Von Dean and her kids had visited us, and we had taken them to church there, I think, once. And I know he said, because he lives in southern Illinois, down there, a little bit north of Carbondale somewhere. And he's every now and then he's in Carbondale, and he drives by it, and he tells me that every time he drives by it, he remembers going to that church with us, because it was so pretty and big and massive. And so anyway, after a while, we decided we wanted to go to a smaller church there. And so there was one, by that time, we had moved out of the little old lady's house, simply because it was just like a block or two from campus. And Southern had decided to buy up a bunch of those old properties and tear them down and put in some big buildings, which they did. So these ladies were gonna have to move, and so we moved, and Mother and Dad, or Daddy, found a guy that had this old mobile home. It was silver, I think, somewhere down south of Lawrenceville. And so Daddy bought it from him and took it. Daddy always had a truck. He always had trucks, or always all kinds of old cars around, because he loved to fix them up and make new kinds of cars out of them. And so he went down and pulled that. It was only 8 foot wide by 27, or 24 feet long. It was small. It had a 1 bedroom in it, and a little kitchen and so forth, and a bathroom, and a living room. But anyway, so he pulled that back to their house. And they completely stripped it down and cleaned it up. They even used muriatic acid that you put in pools to clean out the bathroom. So it was spick and span when we got it. And so then, after several months, and it was in winter. It was real cold in the winter, and so it was done. And we were going to have to move out of that apartment. And so they made arrangements. They said, well, what they'll do, Mother and Dad would pull that trailer down to Carbondale, and we would, if we could find a place to rent, to set it up and to live there. Well, there was a nice, real pretty trailer park right outside of Carbondale, ways out in the country, kind of, and so we thought, now that'll be a nice place. And so when we had made arrangements to rent a lot there in that mobile home park. Well, the day we got there, we had tons and tons of rain. And when we pulled into that trailer park, the mud was knee deep everywhere. And my dad took one look at it, he said, there's no way we can ever get that trailer in there. And so we thought, what are we gonna do? So Darwin always had a buddy somewhere, Darwin. And so he got on the phone, and there was this guy right there in Carbondale, right on the main drag going west out of town, I think. And he had a filling station there, and Darwin had made friends with him. And Darwin mentioned to him, he said, I'm trying to find a place to rent, and there just isn't any place. And he said, I've got enough of a backyard here. It's paved. And he said, there'd be room if you want to pull your trailer in here and park there a month or two, you can do that. And he wouldn't charge us much. And so we did that. So we lived behind his filling station for a while. And we had a kitty cat. We had a little yellow kitty cat we named Mikey. And Yvonne heard me say it was Mikey, and she said, Mikey? I said, yeah, he's my kitty cat. Because her son was named Mike, and she thought that was awful. But
it was an orange tabby.
Yeah, he was the cutest. He was a little kitten. He had been run over. And so he had something wrong with him to the point where, how when you have a cat and you hold it out and turn it upside down and drop it, it'll rotate round and fall on its feet. Well, he couldn't do that. But he was the sweetest little thing. We just loved him, and he just made our house a home. You know, we had him in the apartment, and then we moved him into the trailer. And then, so we lived there for 5 years in that trailer. Well, 4 years, I guess, a little over 4 years, because Darwin took an extra year to work on his master's.
And you moved the trailer to the trailer park?
Yeah. And so anyway, that's right, I skipped ahead. So we were behind that filling station over Christmas. And we went to the store, and we said, we gotta have a Christmas tree. And we went in the area where they were selling Christmas trees, and there was this branch. It was maybe this tall, and it had, you know, a few branches on it. It was a little tree. And so we bought it and decorated it and had it sitting in our, I think on top of our refrigerator in our trailer. And then, so we had some kind of something to hang around about Christmas, and we had hung that up on our windows, and so that we were decorated for Christmas. So we lived, like I said, we lived there for a long time, and they wouldn't let us keep Mikey. The university owned the trailer park. It's called the University Trailer Park, and they wouldn't let us have a pet. So the only thing we could do is give Mikey back to Mother and Dad. He had come from their house. Well, they wouldn't have a cat on the inside of the house. So he lived outside again, and he got along all right. They liked him, and he was a pet, but he disappeared somewhere along the line, and something probably killed him, or he got run over. And so anyway, it was sad, but we were living at the trailer park, and we decided we'd like to go to a smaller church. So we went to, I'm trying to think of the name of the church. It was Methodist Church. It was closer to where we lived, closer to campus, but not right at campus. And it was a lovely congregation, and Don Carlton was the pastor. He was a young man, had a young wife. She was so pretty. She was from New Jersey. She's the one that lived 20 miles from New York City and had never tasted pasteurized milk until she went to college. So, you know, she lived on a dairy farm. I don't know what she lived on, but anyway, I think on a farm. But they were the sweetest people, and they were so nice to us, and we just felt accepted there, and the people were nice. I sang in the choir there for a while, and it was a nice experience, and we were there the whole time then until we moved from Carbondale. And then during when we lived in the University Trailer Park, it was full of young married couples, just like us. Some our age, some are older, some were graduate students and things like that. And we had some good friends there, several of them. Jim and Kay lived down on the corner. I don't even know their last name anymore. Karen and Bill lived, Darwin and I were kind of on the end of a section. It was in an oval, the trailer park was, and Darwin and I were kind of on the end of a section, and over kind of to the back of us, behind us was the laundry and bathrooms if you needed them, but there was a laundromat. And then beyond that, I'd see like there was another trailer in there, but I may be wrong. And then anyway, beyond that was Karen and Bill Hedges' trailer. They were young, our age, got married about the same time we did. They were from Benton, Illinois, and they're my close friends today, and all Darwin's close friends. We still visit whenever we can, and I hear from them all the time. We text each other, and anyway, they were a wonderful couple. We had such a good time together. We really did. Bill was he was silly. He was lots of fun. And Karen, I had stopped going to class, going to school, and I decided, and that was while we were living there in the trailer park fairly early on, and I decided that I needed to find a job which paid more than my job that I had. I had a job on campus, a full-time job as a secretary on campus in the Department of Anthropology. And that was interesting because They were all graduate students that were in and out all the time. We got to know all of them, and the professors were such nice people. And they, and you know, they just, I mean, one was from Columbia, and others were from different states. One was a Mormon, which is the first Mormon that I ever got to know. He was a wonder. He was I think he lived near us in the trailer park, if I'm not mistaken. He and his wife. He had a wife. He was older, and some kids. And I just got to know them real well. They were all nice guys. They were all men. No, there weren't any women graduate students in anthropology, and I think all the professors were men too. It was Dr. Lang and Dr. Golly, a lot of them, a whole bunch of them. And so anyway, I worked there for a year or two, a couple of years, and my boss he was a real brilliant man, but he was a smart aleck. And he just, you know, and so one day, I don't know, something was done and so that he did, and I didn't like it. And he knew I didn't like it. I can't remember now what it was. It wasn't anything bad, but you know. And so I decided that I needed to find another job. And that night, Karen and Bill and Darwin and I used to go picnicking all the time. We'd go out to Crab Orchard Lake and barbecue or grill out, and we'd go to the parks, and we'd take off on weekends. And Darwin and I, on weekends, we traveled all over southern Illinois. I don't think there was a small town in southern Illinois which Darwin and I have never been in. And we saw so many historical places and so many quaint places. There was one down there that was called Ma somebody's restaurant, and it was a big thing where you all went in and sat around the table. You maybe didn't know everybody, but you sat around and passed all the dishes. It was all home style stuff, you know. And I remember they had a turtle in a big tub out back.
Like a sea
from the
turtle?
river. See, this was all near
river turtle.
river turtle. This was all, you know, just Carbondale was kind of in between the Ohio River on one side and the Mississippi River on the other side, even though it wasn't next to them. And we would go over to some of the parks down there, Bald Knob, which has got a great big lighted cross, and it's still there. You can see it for miles. And Cave and Rock was over on the Ohio River, which was a place where all the old-fashioned, historical pirates used to hide out. And there was a covered bridge over at Chester, which was on the west side. And then anyway, we were in all of those towns, and we'd go to all those places, and that's the first time I ever tasted Maid-Rights. Maid-Rights was like a little drive-in restaurant, and it was like a Coney place, a Sloppy Joe place, except it didn't have tomato sauce in it. It was other kind of sauce. Everybody down there thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I couldn't understand why. So, but anyway, that, you know, so while we were down in there, we used to do so much traveling all in that area. It was such fun. Occasionally we'd go to St. Louis, because that wasn't very far away, and it was just really nice. And Darwin had a buddy in the agriculture department down there, which was a beautiful, beautiful building. And his name was Don Cloth, and they were our age. He was married to Linda, and they were the ones that lived right between us and Karen and Bill in a trailer. And so we were all buddies, and we'd all travel and go places together, you know. One weekend, a bunch of us decided to get together, and there was another ag major, and his wife was with us, and he didn't live in our mobile home park, but I can't even think of his name now. But a bunch of us piled in a great big old car. I think that might have been Don Cloth's dad's car, and drove to Florida. And spent one night out. The rest of the time we were just driving. One night we stayed in this motel, and we all stayed in the same room. And we pushed the beds together, and we were boy, girl, girl, boy, boy, girl. Because we were good people. We didn't do bad things. And and that was fun. And I'm trying to think, the ag guy that was with Don Cloth and Darwin, he was an ag, they were all ag majors, Aggies, and he was so funny. He would do anything. And I know that morning we had breakfast down there, and we sat down, and he picked it. They had one of those, like you've got it, one of those little cows that you put cream in. He says, "Oh, look at that," and turns it over. And of course it goes everywhere. Well, that was funny. I still remember that. I don't know why. And so anyway, then we drove back home, and from Florida we went to just the Panhandle. I'm trying to think where in the Panhandle. We did go to the ocean.
Pensacola?
So where?
Pensacola?
Probably, because we did go down to the ocean. And then we got in the car and drove all night and went back home. So anyway, that was, we did fun things like that. And so, Karen and I, we were very good friends. Karen and I could, to this day, if she walked in the door, we would continue the conversation that we had 3 years before. And we just clicked. And she was a good religious girl, and I always went to church, and we had good conversations. I mean, and Bill and Darwin were fun, they were different. Bill was, what was his major? I don't remember what Bill was majoring in.
He went into agriculture though, right?
No, Bill didn't. Don Cloth did. He was an ag major. In fact, he got his doctorate. And when he graduated, he and Linda moved to Oklahoma. Big university down there. I can't think of the name of it. And he got his doctorate there. And all the time now, after he graduated from that, he's worked for Bush in St. Louis, the beer company. And I think he was a buyer, maybe, I'm not sure, of agriculture, of all the stuff they needed that you put in beer. And so anyway, I don't know for sure what he did, but something, he had a good job. And they lived in St. Louis all this time. And so anyway, getting back to us, Karen told me, she says, you know what, she had worked all the time after she had, I don't know if she ever went to college. She's taken classes, but I'm not sure if she was an actual college student. But anyway, Bill, of course, was in college, and Karen, they both grew up in Benton, Illinois, and Karen's dad had a grocery store. It was the neatest thing. And she'd go down there and she'd pick out all the groceries she needed. That was, I thought, lucky. And anyway, she said, well, in our office, which at that time was called the Department of the Department of Mental Health, is where she worked as a secretary. And that's the same one that moved further on after I was there for a few years as the Department of Children and Family Services, which is still active in that state, of course. And it was the same office. We had child care services, we had adoption services, we had the investigator services, and all the social workers that went with it, and I don't know what all. And so with different areas within it, blind services. And so Karen says, we need somebody in the office. And there were 9 secretaries in that office. It was in an old building downtown in Carbondale. And in fact, one of the girls, Bobby was her name, she was sweet. She did the telephone answering board, the board. It was a big old fashioned board, and she had, just like you see on the old movies on TV, she had to plug it in
Switchboard.
to different things. Yeah, it was a switchboard. Had to plug it into different things for different phone calls and everything. And so anyway, we all had somebody to work for, and we all typed well. We all took shorthand because I excelled in that in high school, so I didn't have any problem with that. And and that's pretty much mostly what we did. Took dictation and typed it up, and then we had an office manager, and she had to read everything we typed, because it was a state agency. It belonged to the state of Illinois, just like it does here. I'm sure it's the same kind of thing down here. And so everything had to be accurate in it, and so I worked there for probably for at least 4 years, maybe more. And while Darwin was in school, I'd ride lots of times with Karen to school, to work, and she was in the same office. And right toward the end of when I moved from there, Karen had been made office manager, and she did an excellent job. She was good. And then Darwin graduated, and I remember his big grad. I had never seen anything like it. Southern Illinois University is a huge, huge university, and I don't know how many graduates were there, but they all graduated out of the huge football field. And it was an evening graduation. It was so nice, and he was so handsome in his cap and gown, and I was thrilled to death. And by the way, his cousin, Marion Wagoner, who was a year younger than Darwin, went to Southern too. And Darwin, they graduated the same year. Marion was a real bright student. He had a real high IQ, and he got through college fairly quickly. And then after he graduated that night, because they graduated in the same ceremony, after he graduated, he went to Yale to get his doctorate, and has worked out in the East all this time. But anyway, let's see, Don Clove graduated. I think Bill Hedges waited a while. I don't think he quite graduated that year. Several of our friends all graduated. We were all about the same age. And so anyway, and I remember I had a cute dress I had bought for that. It was black and white, and I wish I still had it. Of course, there would be no way I could fit into it. I was real tiny. And yeah, there's no way I could ever fit into my wedding gown. You know how some people say they do. And so anyway, Darwin graduated, and right after he graduated, then we had made arrangements, and we sold our mobile home down there, right where it was standing, sold it right there at the trailer park. And we, in the meantime, Darwin and I had painted it a light blue and white color, and that made it look pretty. At first, I think it was silver or something. And then Darwin had, he was still working on his master's. And so he was busy a lot in the next couple of summers on that. And but he had decided that he continued working on his master's in the summers and in the evenings or whenever he could do it, so he could get a job. And he was qualified to teach. He went into ag ed. And so there was a job available. He applied several different places. He did his student teaching before that in a town there in Southern Illinois somewhere. Now, I know he and another guy rode together to that. And then anyway, he applied at all these different schools, and the first one that called him was Hardin, Illinois, and a little tiny town on the Illinois River. We didn't even know where it was. We didn't know what kind of a place it was. It was about 40 miles north of St. Louis, and about 35 or 40 miles northwest of Alton, Illinois. And it sat right on the Illinois River, the whole town did. And there were big high bluffs and big high semi-mountains around. It was a beautiful area. And it was a narrow county that narrowed down to the St. Charles, Missouri area, right at St. Louis. And on one side of the county was the Mississippi River, and the rivers met right down there around St. Charles. And so, anyway, it was an interesting place to live. It was beautiful. It was historical because everywhere had artifacts from ancient Indians. That was a big deal there. People would come. The Northwestern University from Illinois had an office there. I mean, they worked there all the time on excavating. And we had, well, anyway, we moved to that little town.
And you covered a lot of this, I think, last time.
Yeah, I think I've told you about Darwin would go excavating with the pastor there.
A little bit about that, but you did cover his teaching, his jobs.
Yeah, I told you all about that. And so anyway, we enjoyed living in that little town. The people were so nice to us. They accepted us. We went right away to there wasn't a Methodist church, so we went to the Presbyterian church.
Yeah, you talked about that.
So they accepted us, and we had a good time there. We've had some real good friends, just lots of good time.
I have one other question about before you got married was when did Dad ask you to marry him and give you a ring?
Oh, yeah. He gave me a ring. He asked me to marry him at Christmas time.
Halfway through his freshman year, your freshman year?
No.
In college?
In high school.
In high school.
We were seniors in high school. And of course we had been dating for a couple of years, and everybody knew we were a pair. And so I'm trying to think if he gave me a ring then. He gave me a ring. I don't know. But for Christmas that year, he gave me a cedar chest, which is there in
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah. And so when he did that, Mother says, well, he must have some, he must be planning for you, because he wants you to fill it full of things to have in your home someday. But anyway, that was my mother. But anyway, I kind of think he gave me a ring then, or maybe it was a little later, but I had that ring before I graduated from high school, not very long. I think he gave me the ring for high school graduation, I think that was what it was. And I had my ring. And
was it a new ring?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was and I still have it today. It was a white gold and had diamonds on it, and we had, after I married, we had it fixed to where you weld it together so you wouldn't lose one of them. And I'm still that way today. And that's something about living in Hardin. And of course I wore it all the time. And I remember taking a class at college, and it was a speech class. And I was giving a speech. Of course, I was always scared to death and nervous about giving a speech or anything at that time in college. And I remember I stood up there and gave my speech. It was, who knows what it was about. And when I sat down, my professor, who was some young smart aleck, he says, well, Judy, he said, I wasn't going to take that wedding ring away from you, or that. No, it was an engagement. It was before we got married. It was an engagement ring, because see, we didn't get married for another year after we graduated from high school. But he said, I wasn't going to take your engagement ring away from you, but you stood there and played with it the whole time. And that embarrassed me. I was so, so tender at that age. But anyway, so we were living in Hardin then. And you know all about Darwin School there, and I subbed there, and you know all about that. And then you came along.
You want to turn that light on next to you, Mom?
Yeah, we would
Just pull on the cord.
we had been married, we were married 6 years. So we had been married about 3 years or 4 years, whatever, when he was in college and I was working.
Thank you.
And then we moved into Hardin, and so then we thought, well, it would be nice to have a baby, because we were, you know, we weren't newlyweds, you know, and so we decided we wanted a baby. So I got pregnant and lost that baby. I had a miscarriage, and that was kind of sad for me. Mother thought I didn't care, but anyway, that was my mom. And but we got along, you know. It wasn't like I had a baby to hold, you know what I'm saying. And I hemorrhaged a lot, and they took me to the hospital. Darwin drove me to the hospital, and but I got along fine. I just had to. And when I went back, everybody knew us. A lot of people, and all my neighbors and everything. Some of the girls that lived near me, we'd get together for coffee once a week, you know, and you know, we just knew each other well. It was just a typical small town living. So anyway, the day I came home from the hospital, Darwin brought me home after having been in the hospital for a day or two, whatever. And everybody, word got around. Everybody knew I'd had a miscarriage. Nobody knew that I'd hemorrhaged so much. They didn't have to give me a blood transfusion, but they debated it. I really hemorrhaged. And so anyway, there I was, and I had a whole room full of people visiting me. And they stayed, and they stayed, and they were so sweet. And I kept thinking, I know I must be black and blue in the face because I'm about to die. And so anyway, that was the hardest thing. That was hard on me. That laid me flat on my back for a couple of days. You know, I just didn't have the blood, you know, the energy. And but anyway, they were sweet to do that. So after that, and then we were married another, and you know, after that was another 3 years before I found out that I was pregnant again. And then we had a beautiful little baby girl who was
How was your pregnancy?
cute. Huh?
How was your pregnancy?
Oh, I wasn't. You wouldn't have even known I was pregnant. I didn't know I was pregnant. I had very little. If I had any, I never threw up or anything. Never had any of that. If I had any, I didn't have any morning sickness, but I did get tired a lot. It was fatigued some, but it just went so well. And they had at my church, they had set up a Saturday afternoon, I think, maybe. Were you born on a Saturday or a Sunday?
Tuesday.
Well, anyway, I think it was probably Sunday afternoon. They had set up a bridal shower for me. I mean, a baby shower for me at church. And so there we were. And I mean, there they were. Well, anyway, they weren't there. When the day they were having the baby shower for me, I had you. Or the day, I had you, I think I had you a couple of days before that. So if you were born on Tuesday, that Sunday before is when I was in the hospital, and I don't know.
I thought it came pretty quick.
You did. That's not right. Anyway, you and I were in the hospital when they were to have the baby shower for me, so they had to cancel that. And Darwin wasn't. We were. I haven't told this to you about. I think I spent 9 days in the hospital with you. Not that I had to. I didn't even have any. I didn't have any pain when I had you. I did have some back pain, but didn't hurt that bad. I had worse menstrual pain as about the time I was a senior in high school than I ever had when I was pregnant and had you. Now I did request a, what do you call it now? I've forgotten.
I think yours was a spinal.
No, it wasn't a spinal. but it was next to
caudal
that.
block.
Caudal block. I had a caudal block, and so that cuts down on the pain for me. And the only thing that was painful after I had you was, you can't.
Episiotomy.
Well, I guess that's what caused it. You can't move around too easily because it hurts. It's down there. But nothing else did. I mean, it went so smoothly. I went into the hospital probably, well, I lost my water that afternoon. Would have been Tuesday afternoon. And I didn't know what to do. And it kept it didn't gush out like they told me it was going to, because Darwin and I had taken prenatal classes. Nothing went like they told me it was going to. And all they did is dribble all afternoon. And so I had one of my close friends, Jenny. She was a registered nurse. And so I finally called her. I said, Jenny, I don't know what I should do, but my water keeps dripping out. And she said, Judy, get off your feet. You've got to get off your feet. You can't do that. The cord could wrap around that child's neck. That scared me to death. She said, call the doctor. So I did. I called my doctor, and he couldn't see me, or somehow. Anyway, he transferred me to another doctor in Alton. I was going to go to the doctor in Jerseyville, which was closer. And so anyway, I ended up going down to Alton, and that was a 40-minute drive. Well, and of course, at that time, I sat there and sat there in the car. So I got to the hospital and went in, and I said, and it was a month and 2 days early before you were supposed to come. And so they didn't pay much attention to me. I sat out there in the hallway for at least a half hour or more. Finally, they came out and wanted to know what was wrong with me. And I told them, and they said, well, come on in, we'll check you. And so I went in and they checked me, and they, come on, you gotta move. You're gonna have a baby. And they really flew, Doris, let me tell you. And so I was put in the delivery room, and they called the doctor right away, and he came. They called the anesthesiologist, and he came. And they told me, they said, that is so rare, especially for the anesthesiologist to come in an emergency situation like that at night. It was at 2 o'clock in the morning you were born, and I must have gone into the delivery room maybe around 1, who knows.
I wouldn't think they'd need the anesthesiologist unless that was the one in charge of the
caudal block.
Got it.
I had to have that, and they wouldn't let anybody else give you one of those. And so I didn't have any problem. And so I was put in the hospital, and then they didn't bring you in until 11 o'clock the next day. And I kept saying, where's my baby? I want to see my baby. And
yeah, you'd think I would have needed to nurse.
well, no, yeah, you would think. But they told me that at the beginning they give you the what do you call the liquid, the water, the fluid?
Colostrum.
Colostrum. They said right there that they gave the babies the colostrum when they first came.
Well, that happens in the breastfeeding
I know
process.
it does, but that didn't work that way. They had that hospital in Alton had lost 30 babies a few years before, and they would allow no one into the hospital to see the baby. Darwin couldn't even see you for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. I mean, other than when I was lying there after you were born and you were stretched out here on my stomach and you'd go, it was so cute. And they let Darwin come in, but he couldn't touch you. He couldn't hold you, couldn't touch you. You had to stand there and look at you and smile.
Must have had a virus or something in that hospital.
They did. I don't know what it was. But that's why they said nobody was allowed. Nobody. Finally, they did let my pastor come in and visit me about 2 or 3 days later. But anyway, so that was the experience I had. And everything went fine. They brought you in then after that, and it was so cute. You were all ready to nurse. You knew right what to do. I thought, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
the nurse told me, said, don't worry, the baby knows. And you did.
Yeah, most babies do, some don't, yeah.
It was so funny. And they bring you in then, 2 or 3 times a day or night, whatever, and I nursed you then. And I know they told me, they said, now she's not getting milk yet, after I don't know how many hours. And then, but anyway, it worked real well. And in the meantime, Darwin had to go to Illinois, to Southern Illinois University to finish up a class that he was taking in order to get his master's, and he still wasn't finished with everything, but he had to do that. So I wasn't gonna be home, so we told the doctor, said, is it all right if he leaves, because I'm not at home anyway, and that's why they kept me in extra days, because they knew that he couldn't be there. And of course, we had wonderful insurance and everything was paid. It didn't cost us hardly anything to Reese, and that was a blessing. So anyway, Darwin was gone most of that time, and while I was in the hospital, I had a roommate in the hospital, and she had a little boy, and he bawled all the time. And she was constantly calling for the nurses to come in and hand me that over there on the chair, or over on the table, or bring me a drink, or constantly she did. And it used to make me mad because I was the older one, and I'd been in there a day or two before she was, I guess. And they'd come in and walk in the door and say, well, what do you want now? And I say, I didn't call you. They always came to me. It used to make me so, I guess they thought since I was older, And I remember asking the doctor that night when I was in the process of having you, I said, oh, and this gal, I take it back, she was there at the same time you were. Her baby must have been born about the same day you were. And all the time, he started bawling from the day he was born. And anyway, I asked the doctor once, I said, well, what's easier for you as a doctor? A baby born to an older woman, or a baby born to a real young person? He said, well, of course, the older woman. He said, that's always a lot better. And so anyway, now I suspected that anyway, after having been in the room with her. She was young. And so anyway, so we lived there, and by the time you were christened in that Presbyterian church there at Hardin, Mother and Dad came for that. And our close friends, Bill and Patsy Hallemeyer, they were darling. I still communicate with them. We were real close friends. And we had other real close friends. They were both teaching with Darwin, Bob and Linda Shanks. I hear from them all every year, once a year anyway. But anyway, Bill stood up with us for your christening. Of course, Darwin and I were up there, and you and Bill. They wanted an elder. He was an elder at that time in the church, and they wanted. I guess you have to have that. And then later, then we moved. You were probably a couple years old or so, and we moved. Then from there, we moved to. We moved to Mother and Dad's house for a little while. No, wait a minute.
I think Taylorville was next.
You're right. Darwin decided he needed to go out of teaching because he wasn't making enough money. And so he did apply at several other
Yeah, you talked about
places.
that.
I did that, okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then, so anyway, you know what, from then on, what went on.
Well, you can talk more about Taylorville. You talked a little bit about it, but if you want to talk more about it.
All right.
Like your friends and neighbors and...
Okay. All right, well, we moved...
Oh, and the angel experience.
Oh. We moved... by the way, when we still lived at Hardin, Darwin was supplied a truck, a nice new truck, as he was the ag teacher there, by the Ford garage, which was right down the street from where we lived. And so we then, the Volkswagen still worked, but we felt we needed a little better car because we had a baby. And so we went to Ford garage and bought this beautiful, it was a hard top, had one of those like leather tops on it, it wasn't a It was just a regular car, and it was a kind of a medium green color. And so we were proud of that, and we had that when we moved then, and still had the Volkswagen for a while after we lived in Taylorville. But anyway, in Taylorville we found just a nice little, beautiful little home. It wasn't a real big home, but well, it was big enough, and in a nice subdivision. And we lived there. We rented that. No, we bought it. We bought that home, and we lived there until I don't know how many years we were there. How old were you when we moved from Taylorville? Do you remember?
5 or almost. That's
right.
5.
Yeah, you had started in kindergarten in nursery school at Taylorville, and then we moved.
To Bridgeport.
Yeah.
When I was, so about 3 years we lived there, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And we,
In Taylorville.
and Darwin was, was promoted to, the state office of, Farm Bureau. Well, he was at Taylorville. Right. He managed the local Farm Bureau office there in Taylorville. And, because every place that he applied for teaching, they didn't pay any more than what he was making at Hardin. He could have just stayed there. He even went to junior colleges, and they were paying less than what he was making at Hardin teaching agriculture. And so he decided to go out, and of course he had a lot of contacts of people, you know. He was really good agriculture teacher. He taught shop, and back then, they didn't have a special ed program. They had a special ed program because I helped. I was an aide in it for a while, but that was only on the elementary level. And in high school, where Darwin taught, they didn't have a special shop class, and they didn't have anywhere for a lot of well, I shouldn't say problem students. No, I guess not.
At risk.
No, it wasn't an at-risk program. So anyway, Darwin was in ag, and a lot of the people, a lot of the things, and that's the way it is sometimes in some schools. If you have a lot of students that aren't real at risk, and yet they don't work well in the regular classroom, they'll put them in something like agriculture or shop or something like that. That's what they used to do.
Automotive.
Well, they didn't have an automotive back then, but so anyway, Darwin this was a brand new school. I explained what that looked like before, didn't I? With the TVs.
Yes.
It was a brand new school. It was absolutely beautiful. He had a huge shop and a nice sized classroom and an office, and he had several agriculture students because it was a farming community, and so he taught shop and helped a lot of those kids that wouldn't have succeeded in life. I know one of the kids that he helped to overcome some problems that he had in school. His parents were always thankful to Darwin because of what he did for their son, and Darwin got him involved in welding, and to this day I think he's a welder somewhere. You know, he didn't go to college or anything. You know, and Darwin could weld. He could do things like that, and had a big FFA group. No girls at that time, and every year he would take them. He'd take all of the boys out to Kansas City. Now I don't know if it was in the state of Missouri. I think it was in Kansas because it's borders the two. And we went out there for the National Agricultural Association meeting, and that was a big deal. The boys loved that, you know, and he always took them, and that was a big. So he was real active in it. He was active in FFA in high school. He was active in FFA in college, and of course worked at the University Farms down there. And then he was active as an alum and as a state officer in FFA after he graduated from college, and as he was a teacher. And so he was always involved in that, and that's, I think, another way he got involved in the Farm Bureau. And so anyway, he was working in at the state office of the Illinois Agricultural Association, which is Farm Bureau. And that was in Bloomington, where we lived. We lived in Normal. And that's why we moved there. We moved to Normal because he had that job. And then we bought a very big old white 2-story house real close to the campus.
Back up to Taylorville.
Well, at Taylorville, he was, had an important job at the.
Talk about your neighbors
Okay, his job was important. It was a farm community. We had a lot of farm friends, couples that we knew, and he had a lot of them. He had a couple of secretaries, or maybe just one. Had a beautiful office there in Taylorville, and had a board of directors that he worked closely with, and he also worked closely with the country companies people, the insurance people, and then the what was the other other end of all of that is involved in the Illinois Agricultural Association, country companies, Farm Bureau, and
FFA?
no, he stayed. He was involved in FFA, but only as he had been a state officer in FFA, and that's the only way he was involved in FFA at that time. But there's another company, another farm company who sells.
Not Farm Bureau.
No, it's all affiliated, but no, it's got another name. I can't even think of it. I should know that. They sold paint. They sold farm implement, or not implements, but farm supplies. Farm supply company is what it was called, I think. Anyway, that was all out of his office there in Taylorville. Now, he didn't direct country companies, and he didn't direct the farm supply place, but he was close to the people that did that, and they all worked in the same building. Darwin was involved in the Farm Bureau, and his main job in Farm Bureau was in charge of the Young Farmers Association in the state of Illinois. And so he would travel a lot. He had a lot of he did a lot of public speaking. He was involved in everything from state fairs to everything, and all of the different things. Every year he had a great big fancy dinner and an annual meeting, and that was quite a big deal. He did well. I remember hearing one of the guys involved saying that nobody could have done it any better than Darwin did, because he had everything. I was standing there. That's how I heard it. I was standing there with a corsage on, and he was standing there, and he looked over there and he pointed at it. He said, "Nobody does this any better. Darwin does it all." And because he had given corsages not only to me, but to the wives of the board of directors and all of that, his president, and all that stuff. And Darwin did a good job. He was a good manager. He knew what he was doing. And so anyway, we lived there, and I finished at that time. I finished, which was a neighboring town near Springfield. I finished at St. State.
Yeah, you talked about that.
Yeah, and so anyway, then. And we had lovely neighbors next door, Wanda and Pete. Oh, they were wonderful.
Collins.
Collins was their last name. They had 2 daughters. Wanda and I were just into each other's house all the time, just real close friends. And of course, Pete was he sold insurance. He was busy all the time. Of course, Darwin was constantly busy. Morning, noon, and night, Darwin was busy at his job. And we went to the Methodist church there, which is where Wanda and Pete went. And then that was a nice big church. There was Ronnie and Dale Deal. He was a big farmer. And Donna and, what was her husband's name? Their last name was Anselm. And he was a big farmer. His dad had been a big farmer. Ronnie's dad had been a big farmer. These guys inherited these farms, real big, had a lot of money. And the Anselms were real sweet. Donna was a nurse. And I kind of think they went to our church. I believe they did. Now, Ronnie and Dale didn't. I don't know. They had 2 or 3 little boys, and I don't know. And they lived out in the country. And and I don't know, Darwin had a lot of different friends. And I belonged to the newcomers club there, and so that was nice. I got to meet a lot of ladies there and some real nice ones. Oh, and we were good friends with the, fairly good friends. They were a little bit different. The head of country companies there that worked in Darwin's, that building. I can't think of their names, but he was charged, he was the boss there in that. And we were friends of theirs and
Could talk about your cats.
well, yeah, when we moved, when we lived at Hardin, Gloria had found a little kitty. She and Jeff at that time had rented a little home there in Bridgeport. And somebody had dumped out this little Siamese cat. And so she adopted it. Well, she couldn't keep it. And so she wanted to know if I'd take it. So I did. And she named him Pie Wacket after the movie, you know. And I never did like that because Pie Wacket was kind of a witch, a lady that was a witch. And so I didn't know what to call him. I thought, well, he's a little tomcat, so I called him TC for Tomcat.
TC was also in that darn cat.
Right. Except it was DC for him.
Yeah, for
TC,
darn cat.
TC
yeah.
for my
Right.
kitty. And
Both Siamese.
yeah. And so anyway, and by the way, when we lived at Hardin, we bought a piano. We went down to St. Louis, went to the Baldwin Company in St. Louis, picked out this beautiful Baldwin acrosonic spinet piano, and had it in our trailer. And I even gave piano lessons on it for a while. And so anyway, I don't know what I was thinking about then. Anyway, we had the kitten at that time. And then when we moved to Taylorville, we took,
You had Mikey in
no,
Hardin.
in Carbondale, we had Mikey, the little yellow kitty.
I thought it was in Hardin. Okay.
No, we didn't. In Hardin, we had TC. And then when we moved with TC to
Taylorville.
We didn't have him too long then.
I remember him.
Do you?
Yeah.
He was a loving, sweet, precious little kitty, but he came down with cystitis, and of course we didn't know anything about it and didn't know what it was. And we took him to the vet, but it was too late. He died that night, so we were sad, and then we lived in Taylorville then for a few years. And you were in nursery school when we moved from Taylorville. And we went to, we bought that.
One more thing about Taylorville, the angel story.
Oh, yeah. Well, Darwin and I started having some problems when we lived in Taylorville. And lots of times he didn't come home until 3 in the morning. Of course, I figured out he was messing around somewhere. And not all the time was he out at a meeting, you know. And so anyway, I put up with that, and but that was very disturbing to me, very unhappy time. Wanda and Pete, I never told them anything about it, but they knew. Pete told me later. He said, you know, we knew that you guys weren't getting along. We knew it just wasn't working. And but I never told them a thing about it. Never told anybody. And so anyway, one night I was sitting in the living room. We had a lovely living room, and we had bought new furniture for it. It was we had a gorgeous brocade couch. It was beautiful. And we would still have it today probably, except Mother got a Siamese cat while we were living there, and they went to Florida for the winter.
That was in Normal.
In Normal, yeah, never mind, that's in Normal, yeah. And anyway, they tore up the couch. But anyway, the cat did. But anyway, I was sitting in the living room on that couch one night.
In Taylorville.
In Taylorville. And we had corner windows. I always liked that. 2 windows met in the corner, and
Yeah,
there were
that's
nice big windows, you know, like for a living room. And so anyway, I was sitting there, and Darwin had built in. He was so creative and so good at woodworking and everything. He just knew everything, and he had built in one wall beside that window, clear into the next in the next wall, which was the kitchen, was on the other side of that. But had built all along there had built bookshelves, and in the middle of the bookshelves he built an artificial fireplace. And it was so pretty because when he finished that wood and had curved all the edges and put in ornate spacings, you know, in the bookshelves, and he had taken a torch and had colored the wood grain with that, and then finished it was beautiful. And so that just really made that little house. Oh, and another thing he did, while I'm on that topic, in Doris's bedroom, in your bedroom, he built a tall bookshelf for you. It was, you know, it was maybe as wide as a door would be, and it was in one side of your room, and it had about 5 shelves on it, and for your toys and your books and things, and each one was painted a different pastel color, and he had taken and cut out numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and that was what held the book shelves apart, or at least it was on the front of the bookshelves.
I remember trying to climb that.
I'm sure you did, and that was the cutest thing. It was nice. We didn't really do much else to that house, and we had a nice garage there. But anyway, and my laundry was in the garage there, Doris. But anyway, those were so creative by him. So now, where are we?
The angel story.
Oh yes, and I was sitting there one night. It was late at night. He was gone. You were asleep. I was unhappy, and I was just sitting there, and I wasn't asleep. But all of a sudden I looked up, and over by the bookshelf stood a tall man in a white robe. He didn't have wings. He had longish brown hair, kind of like what you'd see on Jesus, you know, in some of those pictures. Who knows? But he was standing there, and I had a little collection of little angels on one of those top shelves, and he was standing there, and he was touching one of them and smiling. And I thought, who is that? You know, and then he disappeared. And that's all I knew. But I kept thinking later that he had to be an angel, you know? And,
it didn't look like Jesus.
Well, I didn't see him face on, but he had the hair like Jesus would have, you know. Well, now, that doesn't mean it was real long. It wasn't necessarily real long, but it wasn't
Like
short
shoulder length.
maybe not even that long. But it wasn't short like the guys were wearing their hair or around. But anyway, and then maybe a couple or 3 nights later, when it could have been a dream, but it's so vivid. I was lying in bed, and I happened to open my eyes, and there he stood, looking right down on me. And at that time, I could see his face. He was a light. He wasn't real dark, and he had the dark hair like the other one, but it was more curly this time. His hair was curly, and I didn't remember too much about the other time. And he was looking at me, and I could see his eyes, and his eyes were different. They were like regular eyes. He looked like a person, but his eyes were so dark and so black in the middle that you couldn't see a pupil. It was just like that, you know, and that struck me as something different. And I saw him there, and then I think I saw him another night. And then after that, there was nothing, you know, and I didn't hardly tell anybody about it, you know.
Were you afraid?
No, I was never afraid. Never afraid once. And
Was he smiling at you or straight face?
I don't remember. I remember seeing his eyes. And I remember he was looking at me. I think maybe he might have been I don't know, he was pleasant.
And he
Most
disappeared.
pleasant person.
And then he disappeared.
Well, I don't recall him really disappearing, but, you know, he just wasn't there anymore. The other one didn't disappear either, like the guy in the woods I saw, that he disappeared. But no, they just weren't there anymore. So I don't know if they were dreams, Doris, but they were so vivid that I felt they really happened, you know.
And it seemed more like an angel than like Jesus.
In my mind, it did. I didn't think about being Jesus. I thought about it being an angel, probably because of the white robe or whatever. But he didn't have wings, so who knows?
It's a great experience.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Potomac a little bit more? You talked some about it last time.
Okay.
But
Well, let me just say that not long after that, then Darwin, how was it?
you decided to move.
That was at Taylorville.
Yeah.
And that Darwin got promoted to Normal, Illinois, or to Bloomington, Illinois, to the state office for Illinois Agricultural Association. And so we were moving, and we sold our house, and we had boxed up and moved, and we bought this old 2-story house. It was a beautiful place, a big curved fireplace, or a stairway in it, and it was a pretty big place. It was just right across the street from the campus almost.
You talked about that, yeah.
And it had belonged to a professor on campus and his family, and they had built a new home. And it was not far from McDonald's, because every time he walked out the door, he could smell McDonald's. So anyway, we lived there for a while, and not for very long, because we never got everything unboxed. It was still sitting in the living room. But Darwin didn't change from what he'd been doing at Taylorville, and he told me he wouldn't. He said, you know, I want you to stay with me because I want you to raise Doris, but I'm not going to change my lifestyle, what I'm doing. I told him, I can't live like that. I said, I'm not going to put up with that. I'm leaving. And so I did. I loaded you up and my suitcase and everything that I owned that I could carry, and went to Mother and Dad's. And we moved in with them for, it was about the time school was going to start.
Yeah,
And
you
you were in
talked about
kindergarten.
being in kindergarten.
And
Yeah.
we lived there until maybe about Christmas, maybe, I'm not sure. And then, no, it was before that, because I applied then real quick to a whole bunch of schools, and I remember driving around all the Illinois area, visiting schools, and they weren't in session yet, it was summertime. And
Take a drink.
and trying to be hired. And of course, they'd already hired, everybody had been hired, you know, it was, school was ready to start. And so I happened to mention to Wanda and Pete, I had talked to them and told them all about the situation. And Pete called me back in a day or two, and he said, Judy, he said, how would you like to teach school up around here? I said, anywhere, I just need a job. And he said, well, he said, he sold insurance, and he had a client that was the principal at the school in Potomac, Illinois, which was just north of Champaign, near Rantoul
Danville.
and Danville. And a regular old country community, farm community, a lovely place. It had a brand new school, and it went from kindergarten all the way up through senior and high school. It was kind of a double building. It wasn't one building. And so they needed a reading teacher, a remedial reading teacher that year, and hadn't hired anybody yet. That was a Title IX program or something, and sometimes the hiring of that came later because of the government funding. And so they needed a teacher, and this guy was telling Pete about it, and Pete says, well, I know somebody who's been teaching. I had taught there in Taylorville, you know, and he said she needs a job. And so they had me come for an interview, and I did, and they hired me. to teach remedial reading. And talk about a wonderful job. And it was a wonderful school. Those kids, if there was ever a problem in school, those farm families were right on top of that kid. Nobody was bad in that school. And the high school had a couple of kids, a few kids that were, but I was teaching remedial reading to, I guess, first graders up through high school. And I didn't have I only had a couple of guys from high school that came, because they didn't know much of anything, bless their hearts, and they were constantly in trouble. And but I didn't have a bit of problem with them. I got along well with them. And anyway, I taught all those kids, and I was maxed out. I don't think I could have more than 4 or 5 students in a class, because that was the way that program was set up, all over for everybody at that time. And so right away I thought, well, I better get some special training in reading, because I took class in reading on college level. However, it was research and reading. Now, that doesn't, I read a lot about it, but that didn't help me at all teaching it, you know. And so I signed up for some adult ed courses from Illinois State. They come over once a week and teach at, what's the name of the town we used to like to go to? Rossville. And so I went to the school over there like one night a week and took
Yeah, you talked about this.
Yeah, okay. And so anyway, I continued to do that for a while, so that I got quite a bit of actually college credit. It was all college credit that I got for that, and that helped me with a master's. That's where I started on my master's, really.
Now, what was your teaching experience in Taylorville?
Oh, I taught 6th grade.
Oh,
In Taylorville,
I didn't know
classroom.
that.
Yeah, I had some rough kids. They were it was South Elementary, and that was near the coal mining area. And we had some really problem kids. Now, I had some good kids, but I had some really problem kids, and they gave me a lot of problem. The kids did, some of them. Although I learned, I handled my classroom well. I had to spank a kid a couple of times, and he was ornery, and that was a requirement. If they did something bad enough in the classroom, and the principal felt that they needed to be spanked, the teacher had to do it. The principal wouldn't do that. The teacher had to do that. That was the rule. So I did. I made him bend over and touch his knees and whacked him. But anyway, it was a fun year. But I guess I taught there just 1 year, didn't I?
I think so, because
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Just 1 year, right. And he told me when they left, even though I had a problem with those kids, he said, you would have been hired back. But anyway, so I moved to
Potomac.
Normal and applied at Bloomington.
Well, no. You're still in Potomac.
Well, we moved.
Talk about your church.
Well, it was just a big Methodist church there in town, and that's all.
In Potomac, we went to the Nazarene.
Well, we went to the Presbyterian church.
There was no Presbyterian church.
There was no Methodist church.
In Potomac. There was a
in
Methodist
Potomac.
church.
Oh,
and
yeah.
there was
And I went
a
to
Nazarene church.
No, there may have been. Taylorville was a town of about 10,000 people.
No, Potomac. In Potomac, we attended the Nazarene church.
There was a Nazarene church, big Catholic community, big Lutheran community.
Not in Potomac. There was only a Methodist
That's
church.
At Harvard.
Right. In Potomac, there was only a Methodist church and a Nazarene church.
Okay.
And so we attended the Nazarene church in Potomac.
Okay, all right, yes. After we left Taylorville,
Right.
and after I left Darwin, no, he stayed
and
at
after
Normal.
Bridgeport, right.
Yeah, and Darwin stayed at Normal, and he kept at the Illinois Agricultural Association. Of course, he had a good, important kind of job.
Right.
And he also then got a friend that got him started in real estate on the side. And so he bought several properties there and turned them over, and he fixed up a nice little small duplex right on the main street there of, Bloomington.
Not far from the first Steak and Shake.
No, the Steak and Shake was near Normal, and I'd take you there. And then, but before we moved there the second time, this is when we moved there the first time, because we lived there just a week or two, maybe not even that long, maybe a week, until I thought, if you're gonna keep doing this, I'm not staying. So anyway,
He bought the duplex to live in.
what?
He bought the duplex to live
Yeah,
in.
he fixed that duplex. It was so cute. Well, see, he's creative. He had a brick-lined kitchen, and it was arched. It was really pretty. And so anyway, he lived with one side, and somebody else had the other side. And then we and then I moved to Potomac and rented this in this what had once been a church building.
Yeah, you talked about
upstairs.
this
So I
last
talked about
time.
that, okay.
Yeah.
And
But we
went to the
didn't talk about the
Nazarene
church, yeah.
Went to the Nazarene church. It was a wonderful congregation, wonderful. We had a young pastor and his wife. She and I got to be good friends. She was a teacher at Armstrong, which was another town. I had two friends close to me that both taught at Armstrong.
Yeah.
And that was, they were so nice. And we'd go together for, what did we call it back then? When we had the monthly meetings.
Like parent teacher.
No,
Well,
but
no.
it was something like that, yeah. And so anyway, the Nazarene church was real nice. And of course, right off, they nabbed me to sing, and they nabbed me to play the organ. And they had this one family, it was kind of a wealthy family. They owned big trailer sales and stuff like that down in Danville. But they had this gorgeous, beautiful home, big, long brick home there in Potomac. And they were big leaders in the church. And so their daughter, who was grown, she was a teacher too. I think she might have taught over, I don't know, she taught somewhere. She didn't teach where I did. But she was a real good piano player. And they were all musical. And so they wanted an organist, and they knew I had a piano, and so they wanted to know if I could play the organ. I said, well, yeah, I know how to play the organ, and so it was just a small organ, and so and at that time, for every hymn and everything, the piano and the organ played together. That was the way they did it there. It was a lovely, nice congregation, and you enjoyed that church. I remember once I had to direct Bible school. How many years were we there? 3 or 4? 3. And I had to direct Bible school, I remember. And but anyway, you got along real well there. We had a lot of little friends in the neighborhood where we lived, and in your classes at school. And I taught right down the hall from you. We talked about that. And then and the church was real nice. The people were real nice and friendly to us. It was a real small little congregation. It had been an old United Brethren church. It was the prettiest church in town. It was an old brick church. It was beautiful. And when the United Brethren church went out and became Methodists, that happened to me, in my church. They joined, of course, with the Methodist church there in town, which was another really nice church there. But anyway, so the Nazarene congregation, which had been where I lived, the apartment building where where you and I rented in Potomac, had been the Nazarene church.
Wow.
And the Remleys, the people that I told you were kind of wealthy there in town, they owned that apartment building, and I rented from them. And so anyway.
And how did we end up going to the Nazarene church instead of the Methodist church?
They visited
since you had been Methodist.
They visited me first, and one couple, she was so friendly, and she was real nice, and we got to know them, and so I went there. And I never visited the Methodist church there. I never visited any other church. There was a Methodist church, a Nazarene church, a Christian church. I don't know what else.
I don't think
that
there was
may have
much
been
else.
everything.
Yeah.
There in Potomac. Potomac was a little town just like Hardin, real tiny, farm town.
talk about moving to our house.
Well, okay, after I'd been there for a couple of years, I thought, why pay rent? No, I didn't think of it. Delbert Rimley did, the guy at our church and the guy that rented
Eric's
from.
father.
Yeah, Eric's no. They weren't Rimleys, Eric was.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember their last name.
Lemke's, never mind.
Lemke. The Lemke dad, Eric's dad, worked for Rimley's.
Maybe that's why. Okay.
So anyway, he told me once, he said he was building these nice new little homes. Littler than the one I'm in now, but not much. And so he told me, he said, he said, we can get farm home loans here. Now you can't here, or you couldn't in any of those other towns, but you could in that little town. And he said, why don't you go down to Danville and talk to him? He said, you could pay rent for about half, or you could buy that home for about half the rent you're paying me. And I thought, that sounds good.
That was nice of him to do.
And yeah, it was. It was nice of him. He was going to sell a home to me. See, I was buying the home, see. And so I did, and I got a loan, farmer's home loan, to buy that little house. So I bought that little house, and I decided to paint it green, and it had a little bay window in the front, I think. And everything was brand new. He wouldn't put down carpet or wood floor, so I had tile. So I picked a brown tile that looked kind of wood, and they had 2 bedrooms in it, and a little bath, and a 1-car garage, and that was it. And so we moved our stuff in there, and and before, Darwin was fiddling around with his real estate stuff over in
Bloomington.
Normal, in Bloomington. I told him, I said, I'm going to take some of the furniture. I said, I don't have anything to live, and I gotta put something in this apartment. And so we, Linda and David and a bunch of David's buddies, we went over to our house in Bloomington. Darwin was out of town. He was on a business trip out of town. And so we went over there and loaded up my stuff. We had a big hide-a-bed. It was a kind of an orangey color design, floral thing. We had that in our TV room at Taylorville. I took it, and Mother and Dad gave me a big old rocking chair. It was had fabric. It was an overstuffed chair, and had my piano. And I had, before, Darwin never had paid much attention to the desk, but Mother and I had been out. I had been visiting Mother early on, and we went to some antique shops and things, and I don't know what I was thinking. I knew. I said, Mother, I always wanted to buy a roll top desk. And I'd like to get that and give it to Darwin for Christmas. And if we could find one reasonably priced, because, I had a teacher's salary. And the lowest salary in the county there, the lowest school district in the county. And same way, Hardin was the same way. But anyway, so we were out roaming around and down near Palestine, which is north of Lawrenceville. She said, I know there's this guy down there. My grandmother, they had all of the Roderick family had lived in that area, down there. And anyway, we were down there visiting places, and she said, let's stop in at this place. And I don't know if it was Palestine or one of those little towns. And she said, he's got a whole big building full of antiques. And she said, let's see if he'll sell any. Well, we went in there, into that. No, wait a minute. No, that's wrong. That's when I bought the fireplace, my antique fireplace front that I have.
Artificial fireplace.
And he had that there, and I bought it for $25. Can you
Wow.
believe? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But anyway, no, it was before that. How did I get the?
Roll top test.
Oh, there was a guy living in a community out in the country near Fairview Church, and he was a young man. It was a big old home. They had bought it. A young man, but Mother knew him, and Mother was always going to antique stores and stuff, and stuff. And she knew him, and she knew he had a bunch of antique stuff. So she asked him about a roll top desk, and he had one. And he had taken it all apart and kind of refinished it, and put it back together. Wrong, but he put it back together. And he sold it to me for $200. And so I bought that and took it to Mother and Dad's house. Daddy had a fit because it was so wobbly. He said the guy didn't even fix it. And so anyway, Daddy put a whole new bottom in it. It's got a whole new bottom in it because he said it was going to fall apart. And so anyway, Daddy refurbished it a little more for me. And so I moved it to Potomac when we went up there and had it in the, because Darwin didn't want it. After we moved to Normal, he didn't want it. And that's when I had bought it to take to Normal with us so he could put it in his somewhere. And he didn't want it. And so I said, well, all right, I'm going to take it. And so I had it in our apartment there at Potomac upstairs. So that was a piano, and Mother and Dad, she got hold of a dining room set. That was up there. That great big, heavy hide-a-bed was up there. And that desk, of course the desk comes apart in pieces, but nevertheless. And then we had, each of us had a bed, and you had one of those antique chests Mother gave me from somewhere. Now I know where that chest came from. That belonged to Jeff's grandmother, and they were selling a bunch of her stuff, and I got it from her. And then I had it for a while. I even had it in Normal in that spare room, one of those old, like that one you've got over there with the curved front and everything. And then I gave it to Gloria, and she gave it to Jeffrey. I think he's got it. But anyway, so I had all that stuff. Well, here comes Linda and Dave in a big truck of one of his friends. And we went over and loaded up all that stuff and brought it back over to Potomac. It must have been a 30-mile trip, maybe 30 miles, maybe from Normal to
It
Potomac.
was an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
No, not from.
Oh no, that was.
Yeah, that was from somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe it was probably further than I'm thinking. But anyway, so we drove over to, and I had already rented this upstairs apartment, and it had an outdoor. It was a 2-story. It was upstairs. Had an outdoor stairway. Well, Delbert Rimley, who owned it, told me. He said, I don't think you can get any furniture up that stairway. He said it's just simply not heavy enough. He said it'll fall with you carrying furniture
Well,
up.
how are you supposed to
And I
live
thought, well,
in
how am I going to get up there? He said there's another stairway. Remember, he said that was a church building, and there was an apartment right beside mine. It was my. Let's see, how was that? It was my apartment and that apartment upstairs. That was what was upstairs. And it was a little smaller apartment, but it had the stairway coming up from downstairs into that place. See, it had been used, they used that as a church, and upstairs the pastor used to live there when they had it as a church. So anyway, he said, just bring it up that inside stairway. So they gave me the key and I could get in there. And so, and luckily, there wasn't anybody living in that front bedroom, or front apartment at that time. And so we came, and so they all got out and huffed and puffed and carried everything up those stairs, including the piano, and which was the heaviest thing. And I set up the fireplace there in the living room, and I loved that. I would sit there at night and just look at that fireplace. And it was a big long room, kind of like this, and I divided it with my couch, and had my little dining room table and the piano at the other end of it, and the big desk at that end of it.
And the TV.
Do you remember it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember the TV. And
Oh, yeah, we had a TV in there somewhere. Where was it at?
So the one end was the dining room, but then there was the couch, and then there was the TV near the other apartment.
Okay. And so anyway, we got all settled there. And funny story, this was like at midnight when we got there that evening to unload and put our stuff in there. And you weren't with us, were you?
I have no
I don't
memory
think
of
so.
that.
You probably had stayed with Linda. No, she was with us. You were with somebody. Maybe it was, you were still at Mother, yeah, you were at Mother and Dad's. I left you at Mother and Dad's to move, and.
Probably with the cousins.
Oh, I've got it. No, you were with Mother. You were down there. Mother
But the
and Dad's.
cousins were probably there too.
No, they weren't. It was just Linda and David. I don't know who had the kids.
No, I mean, we were probably all with Mama and Papa.
No, I don't think so. David's parents lived there, just down from where Gloria, the one that Jeffrey bought that house,
Right.
So anyway, that's probably who took care of the kids, her kids. But anyway, so we moved in there, and the story, it was so funny. They needed one more person. There were like two big guys and David. And they needed one more person to help them get up that, especially the piano, up that stairway. It was a steep stairway, and they got it up there, got it started, and couldn't get it any further. And there we were stuck with that piano, not even halfway up the stairs. And and I didn't know anybody. They said, who could we call? I said, I don't know. I don't even know the name of the principal where I worked, where I was going to work. And so I stepped outside, and there was this police car, doing his midnight roaming around, and so I flagged him down. And I told him, I said, I'm moving in here, and I said, these guys can't get the piano upstairs. And I said, could you help us? We just need a little extra boost to get it up there. We've got it part way up. And he said, sure. And so here he gets a great big guy, gets out and comes over, and Linda and I were standing there, and he started talking, and he stopped, and he said, wait a minute, and he took his gun out of the holster, and handed it to Linda, and he said, hold this for me. And she stood there holding the gun like that. That was hilarious.
Not these days.
It was so nice of him to do that, though, I don't think I ever saw him again after that.
Mid-70s.
So anyway, I got moved in there, and you got in there, and then at 2 or 3, I got the apartment all set up, everything put away and set up. Had a huge kitchen with all kinds of cabinets in it, and it had a little entry. When the outside stairway went up, there was like a little porch room there. I think it had been a laundry room, but he wouldn't let me put a washer and dryer in there. He said too many times it flooded the church down below, so he wouldn't do that. And so I made a cute little porch out of it, and there was an old ladder sitting there, and so I painted that ladder black, opened it up, and put a bunch of plants on it. Everybody just went crazy over that saw it. But anyway, and it was all set up, and so I went to Mother and Dad's and got you. And of course, I'd already had you registered to go to school there, and we had taken you out of Bridgeport School then. And that was a nice school. It's a new school.
Yeah, you talked about that.
And yeah, she hated to see you go. She told me, she said, she's the smartest one I've got. She said, don't take her. It was so sweet of her. She was a young teacher. You would have liked her, I'm sure. And you did well there for the few days that you were there. I don't know, a couple weeks or so or whatever.
3 months, I think.
Oh, no.
2 months.
Well, yeah, maybe it was. Yeah.
Because it was
Yeah.
half or 3/4 of a semester, I think.
Yeah, by the time they got me hired, to open my program, and I remember moving into that room that I had to share that room with a couple of other teachers. It was fine. We used bookshelves to divide it off, and I had all kinds of books and stuff, but it was a big job. But anyway, so
You brought me home.
I brought you home and took your hand, and you were so sweet. You were just so sweet. Oh, Mommy, it's going to be so nice, and you were so sweet. And we walked up the stairs, and I walked in, and I showed you all through the apartment, and you kept telling me, "Oh, Mama, it's so beautiful. It's so pretty, Mommy. What a nice place to live." You just went overboard with that. And maybe Mother coached you. I don't know.
I don't remember.
But anyway, you were really praising me for finding that place for us.
Nice.
And you had your own room. You know,
Yeah.
there was 2 bedrooms.
I remember it.
And
So we had 2 neighbors upstairs, if I remember correctly. One was Donna, my art teacher, who moved to
that was later.
Armstrong.
Who's art teacher?
My art teacher at Potomac. Long, blonde hair.
No, she wasn't art. She was PE. PE teacher.
She was, I swear she was my art teacher.
Yeah. No, she was PE teacher. And yeah, when
The second one I thought was the PE teacher.
it was.
She had brown
It was.
hair.
She was a sweet girl. She was a single girl. The first one that was there moved in shortly after I did. Her husband was principal there at the high school, and see, the superintendent was there at the high school or at the grade school. No, and the superintendent was there. He's the one that hired me and everything. But her husband was the principal, and she taught. It wasn't art.
Are you talking about Donna?
No, Donna was an art teacher, but
Yeah.
Donna wasn't living with us. I can't even remember this.
You're
gal.
talking about the one with the short brown hair.
I don't remember her name.
Okay.
Anyway, her mom was a teacher there too, in the grade school there. She taught first grade. I got to be good friends with her, and she lived just down the street from me and from that apartment building. But anyway, they moved there after I did. She and her husband, they didn't have any kids, and they lived there for a while until they moved to a home somewhere, and he was still principal there, I think, when I left. And she was still teaching. She taught there too, the young girl did. And then later, I can't remember anybody's names. The single girl moved up there later.
Donna. No, it wasn't Donna.
Huh?
It wasn't Donna.
No, Donna married a farmer out there. Donna
Yeah,
was
I
from
knew.
Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
And I loved her. She was the sweetest thing, and she was really a good, talented art teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the school board wanted to eliminate the art program because of finances.
Even back then, wow.
Oh, yeah. And she rallied against that, and she even presented a program to the PTA and a program to the board of director, school board, and everybody, showing what her students had accomplished and the awards that they had won in the years or 2 that she had taught there. And she was a good teacher. She probably still lives there because her husband was a farmer with
And
his
she had
dad.
a son, I believe.
Well, not, she did have
Later.
Yeah, and probably more than that. But her husband, and worked with his dad, and they were farmers, and, she and her husband moved into the old farm home, the one that's where
I
she was
remember
living.
visiting
That's
her
where she-
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then were there people downstairs where the sanctuary
There
had
was
been?
I think one apartment downstairs. It was a bigger apartment, and some young couple lived there. She was a snot, that girl. I don't know who they were. And so anyway, we lived there. And Josie Downing, she was an old lady. She had a mobile home right beside that. And for some reason, I knew Josie. I don't know how I got to know her. She was really
Well,
sweet.
because she was a neighbor,
Yeah.
a friendly neighbor, but then wasn't that Leon's grandmother?
Oh, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about him.
Leon I went to school with.
Yeah,
He was like a
and
little
he
boyfriend,
and maybe Josie went to our church because his mom did.
possibly.
She was divorced, but Leon had a little brother, and they went to
Yeah.
our church too. I was never real friendly. She was kind of an odd lady, the mother of them, but Josie was a darling person. So anyway,
And the Bakers, Judy Baker,
She
lived
lived next
across the parking lot or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, there was a parking lot for our apartment building, and then she lived
Yeah.
there. And then right behind us was, what was the little boy you used to play with? Wasn't Toddy, was it? No, it was the other one. There
Or
was
Tracy.
Tracy.
I thought that was when we moved.
No, that was at Potomac.
No, I mean, I thought it was behind our house where Tracy lived.
Oh, you're right, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. That's right. Potomac was an interesting town. It had an artesian, it had a park. And in the park, there were several artesian wells, which means the water runs all the time. It was in a real hilly area, which was real weird, or real strange, I should say, because that was farm country, and up there, farm country was flat. But this particular area right in there, in that area, had some hills, and that's where a park was there. And you used to go there and play. And
I remember a park.
uh,
And the Rimleys weren't the ones that had the kids that had the paper routes, were they? Okay, I remember that house. And those kids, I spent the night there once. Yeah.
there was a little grocery store in town, just like there was at Hardin. And
I remember that.
Yeah, and I had the son of the guy that owned it in one of my classes. How many years was I there?
3.
I had that little boy. See, my students would carry on from year to year too. I didn't have them all day long. They would come to me once or twice a day, and and I had one. His son was in my class pretty well. I got to know him. He was nice.
And I remember walking home from school most days. Because
No,
you had to.
You did, yeah, you did. You walked home with Judy.
I walked by myself most of the time, but yeah, I didn't want to stay because you had to stay after school and work,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to stay. I want to go home and play.
Well,
So I remember
I had you
walking.
stay with me though.
Sometimes.
But I thought you walked with a group of kids.
No, I always walk by myself.
Didn't?
Yeah.
No, I would have never allowed that.
Did you want to bring up Jay?
Well, yeah, I can. But anyway, we were there, and it was nice. We'd go to Danville to shop and things like that. Danville's a big town. And then Champaign wasn't too far away, and Monticello. So we'd go down to Linda's quite often and spend overnight, stay there. You played with the kids a lot that way. And so then we lived there for 3 years, and in my new home, my new house, I lived there maybe a year and a half or 2 years. No, I didn't live there. We lived there maybe a year in that new house.
Yeah, 1 or 2 years.
And it was probably just barely a year. And it was nice. It was a nice little house. And then right before we moved to that house, the next door neighbor to the apartment building was the Beheimers. It was a mobile home, and it was a grandmother that lived there. Well, she had a grandson living with her. His name was Jay, and he was divorced. And so eventually we met. 3 months before I moved is how I only knew him 3 months, and he would come over a lot. And we'd go on dates sometimes. He was kind of a cheapskate, but he was a real nice, caring, very loving, caring man. But he
I think he was also a functional alcoholic.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I remember telling Mother, I said, well, I don't have to worry. I would never have to worry about him dying or being sick. I said he's always pickled.
And wasn't he a mechanic?
He owned a filling station and mechanic shop. It was his business. I mean, he did well, and he had new stuff, nice stuff. He had a nice big pickup truck, and stuff like that.
I remember going camping with his family.
And he had a motorhome, and they traveled. They never went anywhere in it. Well, they may have, but I didn't. But we'd go out camping in the motorhome. He was building. He got this divorce. Maybe about the time I moved to Potomac, or a little after that. And he and his wife had one daughter, and she went to school there.
She was a few years older
Yeah,
than me.
she was 3 years older. But anyway, they had bought there was a river in that area. And there was a subdivision being built up out in that river, and he and his wife were building a new home. It was nice. It would have been a lovely place. They were building a new home, and they split up. And he decided she didn't want the home, and he decided to sell it. Because it wasn't finished. It wasn't quite finished. But I went through it. He took me through it. See, it was not. It would have been a nice home. But anyway, he did well for himself. But I didn't like him. He was he drank too much. He had an older brother that had a son that was always kind of borderline in trouble all the time. Now the brother was fun. He was nice. He had a handy dandy business. He had one of these. He had his own shop out at the edge somewhere. He had one of these great big machines that could drill holes in metal. Something. I mean, it scared me to death to watch it. I mean, it was just so powerful. I mean, it was just like metal was just soft, and of course it wasn't. You know, it was just something like that. Anyway, he had a business of his own, but he was a drinker too. I mean, the whole family was. But his wife was nice. She was real sweet to me. She was real nice. But anyway, yeah, we were. He did a lot of running around at night, you know, with the gang. He had all of his high school buddies that were all still friends, you know.
From Potomac High School.
Yeah, I think and they were all living around there. I think he might have been a year younger than me. I think it wasn't much, but I think he was a year younger than me. But anyway, and so we dated for a while, but it would have never come to. I mean, I could have never lived that lifestyle. It would have been, anyway. And of course, he was still infatuated with his first wife, who had been married once or twice since then. I mean, once maybe. And
so talk about what happened toward us moving back to normal, and then we'll start on normal next time.
Okay. Well, after this with Jay, I split up with him, and I was getting tired of living there, and
why?
Well, I don't know, but you know, I had part of my master's degree. Could have been because of him. I would have never looked twice. You know who he looked like? He looked like Barry Manilow. Mm-hmm. He really did. He was an image of Barry Manilow.
I remember that.
And he was nice. He played the clarinet, but he was a nice, tall guy. But anyway, he wasn't very handsome. But and after the surgeries, Barry Manilow looks better than he did back then. But anyway, I was ready to go. I didn't want to stay around with him around because he was still unattached, you know. And I figured he'd bug me to death, and I just didn't want to be there. And so I decided I had all those hours in so far on my master's, and I thought, why not finish my master's? Why not go to Illinois? Illinois State was the one that I got all those credits through anyway, because they're the ones that came over for night classes to teach whoever wanted to go. And so I thought, why don't I just go back over there and just, I'll be right there. I might as well get a master's degree. And so, so Darwin used to visit with you. He'd come over like maybe once a month, you know. He'd come over and
occasionally I would go visit him.
Yeah, and he would always bring you all kinds of things and
I remember Christmas was excessive.
With you. Yeah, lots of Christmas. He played with you, and he was a good daddy, and he always was a good daddy to you. He just wasn't a good husband to me. And but anyway, he would come over, and every time he left, you cried and cried and cried, and I hated that. But I would never teach you or say anything bad about him to you. I didn't want you to hate him, and I should have.
No, I didn't. You did the right thing.
But anyway, So I called Darwin and I said, Darwin, could I rent a room out of one of your rental properties? Because I said, for Doris and I, because I said, I want to move from Potomac because I want to go back to Illinois State and get my master's. And he said, sure, you can live with me. He said, it wouldn't cost you anything. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to live with you. He said, well, that wouldn't mean anything. You wouldn't have to live in my room with me. And so we did that. We moved in. And at that time, he had sold the big 2-story house and bought some other properties that he was converting over into student properties so he could rent them out. And it wasn't a big home. It didn't have that. It had a kitchen and a nice living room, had some pretty woodwork in it. It was an older home, and it was had a big basement, and that was all. It wasn't a big. It was just a one-level house. And so anyway, he was remodeling that down in the basement, and he put in a couple or 3 student rooms down there, and they were really cute. He had fixed it up really nice. But anyway, he was doing that, and he said, you know, I've got this construction going on, but you don't mind? And I said, no, I'm going to put Doris in nursery school, and I'm going to go to campus and work. It was summer school, and you could go about every day, you know.
I think I was at La Petite Academy.
Yeah, La Petite Academy. In the mornings, and in the afternoons, then I'd pick you up, and you'd be with me. And so anyway, we lived there, and it was a comfortable old home, and he wasn't around much, you know. And so we were there for, you know, I don't know, well, I started applying there in Bloomington and Normal to teach. And of course, the same old, you know, you have to prove yourself, and you have to, you know, they don't know who you are, you know, and they already had their faculty set up, you know. And so anyway, I kept looking for a job there, and I hadn't gotten one, and so I substituted. I started subbing, and so I guess Darwin and I, we talked it out, and we decided we'd try it again. You know, he apologized and everything, said he changed. And I know when we moved, I kept hoping when we moved away from Hardin, or from Taylorville, that he would stop that, but he didn't. And he told me he wouldn't. But anyway, so I remember in the backyard there, it was an old neighborhood where this house was, where we were living. And he was turning into student, you know, housing. And of course he was still at IAA at that time, and selling real estate on the side, and traveling some. When Elvis Presley died, he was traveling somewhere. I know, I remember that time, because he called me and told me that he had died. That was 71, 78, 70, something like that. And anyway, he said, why don't you just stay here with me? Because we had never divorced. I had started divorce proceedings, and because I put it off until I moved to Potomac. Toward the end of living there, I finally decided I'd do that. And because I remember going to a counselor down in Danville, and then I went to one in maybe not. Anyway, when I first moved to Bloomington, then I had started divorce proceedings, and I went to this counselor there. It was a woman who knew Darwin. He had sold her some property, and she didn't like him. And I thought, oh, great. And then when I told him who I was seeing, he said, oh, I'm not going to, because she said, he needs to see me too. She knew him. And I said, so I told him, and he said, I'm not going to go see her. That's the last person in the world that I had ever talked to. And he sure didn't like her either, so they must have had a big falling out for some reason. Probably over some property. But anyway, so I thought, well, I'll just lay this aside. And So I was teaching, I was subbing, I started substituting, and then eventually got worked into teaching at Brigham Elementary, which was, it was south of Bloomington, but it
You
was in
talked
the
about
normal
this
school district.
Last time, yeah.
What?
You talked about that last time.
Okay,
And what we may want to do is stop here and then we can talk more about normal next time.
okay.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.